Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. You are watching Noudle Sound. Thank you for joining me for another week of videos. This video is going to be a short video of how to set up CDJs and also Technics 1210 deck. Like I said, it's going to be a very short video. It's simply going to be how to set up and power the decks. If you want more of a tutorial about how to actually function them, I can do a separate video on that. Just comment below or send me a message and let me know. Let's get into it. So as you can see in front of me, there are two Pioneer CDJ 2000 Nexus. This model in front of you are pretty much industry standard, but there are also the next level of decks that are out in the clubs and other venues as well. They are the CDJ 2000 Nexus 2. And the main difference really from the top of my head that I can remember is that there are a few more hot cues on the side. And we've got some hot cues here. We've got A, B and C. I believe there is also an extra one on the Nexus 2s, and also the LCD screen is touchscreen, which helps for navigation. Apart from that, these are still really cool decks, so we're going to talk about how to power these and talk about the necessary cables that we need to do that. Starting with these covers that I have on our CDJs, these are really good to just in general protect and get rid of any dust that might occur over time. So we are going to get rid of them now. I'm sure you can pick up these on Amazon or something. So let's get into our setup here. Like I mentioned, we have two CDJs and we have a mixer in the middle. This mixer is the DJM900 Nexus, and this is what you're gonna then connect your CDJs to in order for you to get some sound. So if we look on the mixer here, we have 4 channels, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're clearly labeled up here at the top, and each channel does exactly the same thing. It's just repeated 4 times in order for you to then have more channels if you want to use 3 decks or 4 decks. In this case we're using 2, and I've also decided to use channels 1 and 4. As you can see, I've already have some cables plugged in. We're going to go a bit back to front. Since I've already got the cables plugged in, it would be good for you to see where they're supposed to be, and then I'm going to take them out, explain them to you and put them back in again. So here we are, starting with the first cable. This is the RCA cable. You can clearly see that it's the red and white cable, which is the most simplest way to identify it. You can see that it's going from the CDJ on my left, and that's going directly into channel 1 here. So I'm going to take that out. It's also worth mentioning that it's really important to make sure that whatever channels you're putting the CDJ into, it corresponds with your hand, if that makes sense, what side your hand's on. In this angle where I'm looking at the decks, this is on my left hand side, so therefore I'm going to choose either 1 or 2 to plug that in. If I'm now going to connect the second CDJ, which is on my right, I will either choose 3 or 4, just so that it makes sense when I'm going to flip the faders in a mix. I know that if I flip this fader on channel 1, it corresponds to the left, vice versa. So let's talk about this cable. This is the RCA cable, and you can see that both ends are exactly the same. This is in white and red. And what this cable is called is an interconnect cable. Not to get too deep here, but it's good to know some terms. The RCA cable is an interconnect cable, which therefore means that it has higher resistance and higher impedance for high input devices. Please read the definition below for more information. Now, some of you who might have already seen this cable or heard of this cable might have also heard of a phono cable. I'm going to get into a bit more detail about that when I set up the 1210, so make sure you carry on watching if you want to know what the difference is between those two. I'm going to put this cable aside. We're now going to move on to this yellow cable here that you can see is connected from CDJ1 via this cable into CDJ2. Now, what is this cable, you ask? This cable links both two together. So if I take this out from both ends and show you this is called a LAN cable. Now, many of you might have already seen this in your life, but might not have known that it's called the LAN cable. This is also known as an Ethernet cable because, well, it's used for your Ethernet, but it can also be used for linking the CDJs. Now, why, you ask? It's because it runs on a network. Both CDJs are able to talk to each other. So why do we even want the CDJs to talk to each other? I'll tell you why. Where most DJs use one USB, they would then plug it into, for example, CDJ1. Now, that CDJ is only able to read that USB. If I move over to the second CDJ, that has no USB in it, so it's not being able to read any data because I haven't put anything in there. So the best way for this side to now talk to this side is through this cable. Where my USB is plugged into CDJ1 and I've got all my playlists and tracks, this deck would now be able to get exactly the same as this one, almost like a copy, but without me having to put a USB in. So it's really clever. So if you turn up to a gig and you put your USB in one side, you go to your second deck and you realize that it's not reading the USB, it's usually this. So make sure you just give it a wiggle at the back of the deck so make sure it's plugged in properly. Again, I'm going to put this to the side and show you the final cable that we need. Arguably maybe one of the most important cables for setting up CDJs. It's the main power lead. It's this cable here, as you can see it's plugged into the corner. I'm going to take it out. If you've been watching my previous videos, you would have seen this a million times, but I'm going to explain it for you guys again. This here is the IEC cable, also known as the kettle lead. It really just is a UK mains supply, which therefore powers up the decks. So as you can see on the back of the CDJ here, we have the power button. It's just a simple on and off switch. Let's start by plugging our IEC kettle lead in to give us power. Going to plug this side into the mains. Now turning the switch on, as you can see, the CDJ is turning on and I now have power. So next I want to link my CDJs together. To do that, I'm going to plug the LAN cable in. These actually go kind of like upside down. So we're moving from this side and we're going to plug the other end into the CDJ. Moving back over now, we are going to plug in the RCA cables, which goes into the audio out section. Just follow it via the color code, makes it really easy to plug in. We now need to connect the other end of the RCA cable into the back of the mixer here. Now, as you can see on the back here, it reads CD line where there's two inputs available for the RCA connection, and there's also a phono input. And if I take these stoppers out, you can see that they're exactly the same, and it's very easy to get confused, but make sure that you read it properly. The best way to remember this is that phono is for the turntable input, and the reason being is because the phono connection in general has a lower impedance and lower resistance, which therefore means that there's different ways that the mixer can read the way you've input a particular signal into that channel. Therefore, if we plug straight into the RCA high output source and we plug that straight into the CD/line, and it's great that it says that actually, because then it makes it more easier for you to remember which side to put the CDJ deck into. I'll put that in there. In order for this particular channel strip on the mixer to read what signal it needs to identify, we need to switch this rotary to CD line. And there we go, we see signal and we can hear sound. It's great. So now we have successfully connected both CDJs, powered them and linked them and connected them to the mixer on channels 1 and 4. Now, one thing that we need to do is be able to hear through our speakers, because that would be great. If we look at the back of the mixer here, we have two masters, master output. We have one here, this is the master 2, which I am currently using at the moment, and then we also have the main master, which is an XLR out. The master 2 is actually an RCA out, and the reason I'm using that is because my speakers are connected to quite an old amplifier system and they only take RCA in, so that's why I'm using the master 2. Most normal speakers nowadays, apart from these ancient ones that I'm using, which my dad gave to me from the 80s, take an XLR in or even a 1/4 inch jack. And just so you can see what I'm talking about, this is the back of my ancient amp, and this is what the RCAs are connecting from the mixer into the amplifier. Let's now get ready to set up our Technics 1210s. Now, as you can see, I've set up the Technics 1210 here. You may have noticed that there's a few cables on the side that are actually connected to the deck. So I'm going to actually flip this round so you can see what I mean. There is this very important cable here called the ground cable, and these, I know what you're thinking, are RCAs. No, no, no. These are phono cables. And then the other direct connection that we have coming out of here is the UK mains plug. So now I've plugged that in to the mains, we should have power. First, I want to talk through some of the features on the turntable, especially with the 1210 as well. So some of you may notice some similarities. They both have platters, or in this case, platter on a 1210 and a jog wheel on CDJ. They both search through the record. You can nudge it a little bit to get it in time. We've also got the on and off switch, so if I turn it on now, you'll see the red light come on. That indicates that it's on. We've got the start and stop button, so once I press this, the platter will begin to move. And then we also have the tone arm here. And right now there is no stylus attached, but I'm gonna show you which ones that I have. This is by Autophon. I'm gonna now connect, let's go for the scratch needle. Let's do something a bit interesting. Oh my God. Way to attach the stylus is through the tone arm here. So that's where it's gonna connect. So just make sure you pop it in until you feel it sort of clicking and it can't go any further. And then that's when you adjust the tone arm to make sure that it's tight. So now that's not really going anywhere. Let's discuss the phono cable. So this phono cable looks exactly like the RCAs. They're both red and white. Not to get too technical, but just remember that the phono is for the 1210s, it's for the analog gear, and the RCA is for the high output digital gear. So just remember that. It's pretty simple then. Now let's get this connected into our mixer. So we took out CDJ1, so I'm gonna take out these RCAs because we don't need them anymore. Now you'll notice that there are only 2 channels, which are channel 1 and 4, that can take phonos. So make sure that you plug them in on those channels. So now we've connected the phonos, we need to connect the ground cable. Now the ground cable is just really what earths the turntable to the mixer so that there's no buzzing. And how we do that is through 2 grounds at the back, which are in the same corresponding channels, 1 and 4. It's a bit tight, but if we loosen this bit, this is the ground cable, and I'm gonna slot it into this bit here. This is me loosening it, using this sort of hook to hook on to the grounding. The thing I must also mention is that this is how you can see underneath. So it says ground signal, and this is how you know which you're supposed to use. So now we've grounded the turntable, we've attached the phonos, and we've also plugged it in. One thing that's missing from our deck is a slip mat. And the slip mat is simply in the name, it just keeps the record steady. I'm gonna actually choose one record to play. I'm gonna go for one of my favorite records, not only because of how beautiful it looks, but also because it was my first purchase at my first record store day. You can kind of see, yep, it says record store day on it, and it's a really cool record. So let's have a listen. I'm gonna just take out the tone arm from here by releasing this. I haven't switched channel 1 to phono, so let's do that now and press play. Got some signal here. I'm just going to turn up the volume. There we go. That nice crispy sound of vinyl is lush. So there you go. That is how to set up your CDJs and your Technics 1210. You've been watching myself, Noudle. Please like, comment and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. You've been watching myself, Noudle.